everyone, welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is a Commander deck tech, which, man, I haven't been doing much of these lately. But we have a new set, and there's a couple of new commanders here that I find incredibly interesting that I'm going to do deck techs with, and one of them is Rem Karolus, Stalwart Slayer. 1, a red and a white human knight, 2/3, has flying and haste, and has some really powerful abilities here. If a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. If a spell would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage, +1 instead. So right away, I thought this was a great commander, especially the prevent damage thing. The important thing here, though, is that you are preventing the damage to another permanent you control. So Rem does not prevent the damage to himself. If you just cast a Blasphemous Act, he'll die to that Blasphemous Act. The rest of your creatures will survive, but he won't. So you got to be careful with that. However, because he has flying, I can put those non-flying board wipes in there, like Earthquake and Fault Line, right? They're going to deal damage to all the creatures without flying, so our Rem will be just fine. Our other creatures that don't have flying will also be fine because that damage is going to get prevented. Also dealing damage to players, right? Both of these cards are going to deal damage to players, which the damage to us is also going to be prevented because it's a spell that's dealing damage to us. Magma Quake and Subterranean Tremors. There's lots of stuff like this that are dealing damage to all non-flying creatures, and then some of them also have added benefits of dealing damage to planeswalkers or destroying artifacts. So obviously we're going to have tons of effects like that in this deck. Also going to have effects like Radiant Scroll Wielder and Firesong and Sunspeaker. These are both going to be fantastic in the deck. Radiant Scroll Wielder is going to give all those board wipes we're casting life links, so we're going to be gaining a ton of life. Firesong and Sunspeaker is going to do a similar thing with our red instants and sorceries. So these obviously are both going to be auto-includes in the deck. Radiant Scroll Wielder is also going to give us that sort of flashback effect from the graveyard as well. I had talked about how Rem is maybe the first sort of dedicated burn commander. I guess Firesong and Sunspeaker also is sort of a dedicated burn commander. Like basically what I'm talking about is a burn spell commander. Like I have a commander and the whole idea of my deck is casting burn spells, whether it be with board wipes or direct damage. And I think that's what Rem is best at, and that's obviously what we're going to be doing in this deck. Teralf, God of Fury, is also a commander that you can sort of go that direction with, and is also a fantastic fit in this deck, because all those board wipes we're casting, you know, whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, right? So the damage we're dealing with those board wipes and our other burn spells, Teralf is going to deal damage equal to the excess to any target other than that permanent. So that's going to be fantastic in this deck. Obviously, we're going to be putting lots of burn spells in this deck like Lightning Helix and Lightning Bolt. They're just fantastic cards anyway. That's sort of one of the reasons why I decided to build this deck, because I thought, you know, in the beginnings, I thought Rem was a little on the boring side, but some of the cards that I wanted to put in this deck were cards that I've been wanting to play in decks for a while, and we'll get to exactly why. A card like Char, for example, is perfect in this deck. 3 mana instant, deals 4 damage to any target and 2 damage to you, but of course the 2 damage to us is going to be prevented. It's already a good card, but it's a card that's even better in this deck, just like Lightning Helix is a great card that's even better in this deck. Boros Charm is another great card that's even better in this deck. Yes, we can make our permanents indestructible or give a creature double strike, but it deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker instead. Probably the least used ability on that list, at least in Commander, because we're going to be dealing direct damage to our opponents a lot. That's one thing you don't see in Commander. Again, like a typical burn deck in most other formats, in Commander you don't see that a lot. And in this deck, it's going to be great because we can put a card like Satyr Fire Dancer in this deck. 1 and a red Satyr, 1/1. It's an enchantment creature. Whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to an opponent, Satyr Fire Dancer deals that much damage to target creature that player controls. Now we can aim that Boros Charm right at our opponent. It's going to deal 4 damage to them, and then we can do 4 damage to a creature as well. That Lightning Helix, now instead of using that on a creature, we can put it right to our opponent's face, and then with our Satyr Fire Dancer in play, it will also kill a creature. And keep in mind, with our Rem in play, all of these spells are dealing an additional 1, right? So our Lightning Helix is going to deal 4 damage. And again, Chandra's Incinerator and Chandra's Spitfire, 2 cards that I've been throwing in a lot of decks lately. Anytime you're dealing non-combat damage to your opponents, and again, because we're going to be going face with a lot of these burn spells, this is non-combat damage. Any of those Earthquake type effects going to be dealing damage to our opponents as well. That's non-combat damage. So our Chandra's Incinerator is going to be 1 red mana, almost guaranteed every time we cast this spell, because it's going to be reduced by the amount of non-combat damage dealt to our opponents. It's going to be 1 red mana every single time. And again, just like the Satyr Fire Dancer, whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerator deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls as well. So again, now we can shoot that lightning helix directly at our opponent's face, and it's going to be done to one of their creatures as well. So we get double duty out of it. Chandra's Spitfire is just going to get really huge. I mean, it's going to get +3/+0 until end of turn whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, which is going to be every single turn, right? So every single turn, our Chandra's Spitfire is going to be at least a 4/3, maybe even a 7/3. And Blaze Commando, man, there's a card that probably has never seen room in the 99 of a Commander deck before, but it's perfect fit here. 3 red and a white Minotaur Soldier, 5/3. Whenever an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage, any kind of damage, create 2 1/1 red and white soldier creature tokens with haste. I mean, geez, that's going to be happening a ton in this deck. And again, remember, our commander is protecting our non-flying creatures from taking damage from those board wipes, right? So our Blaze Commando and all those tokens we are creating, that damage is going to be prevented. But like I say, it's always great to have backups for your commander. Tajic Legion's Blade is obviously going to go in this deck because it has that very similar effect of prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to other creatures you control. So with Tajic in the deck, obviously, if they're both in play, Tajic is going to prevent the non-combat damage to Rem, and Rem's going to prevent the damage to Tajic. These two are going to be bosom buddies. Blessed Sanctuary is going to be another way we can do this. 3 white enchantment, prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to you and creatures you control. So that's going to prevent all the damage from that board wipe we're casting. And also, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, we get a 2/2 white unicorn creature token. Hey, why not? And then Mark of Asylum is going to do the same thing. 1 and a white enchantment, prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to creatures you control. So we can just put lots and lots of board wipes, right? There will be a Blasphemous Act in this deck. We can just put a ton, Chain Reaction, any of that kind of stuff, because we have so many of these effects that are going to be preventing damage to our commander as well. The board wipes that hit the non-flying creatures are going to be good if we only have our commander in play, but if we have any of these other effects, now we can just start casting whatever we want and we'll be just fine. And I thought another little added bonus here is going to be Radiate effects. So Radiate itself and also Radiant Performer, which does essentially the same thing as Radiate stapled on a creature. Choose target instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single permanent or player. Copy that spell for each other permanent or player that spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those permanent or players. So now any of those effects, like the Lightning Helix, right? We're going to Lightning Helix a creature and then we're going to Radiate it, and Lightning Helix is going to get copied for every single creature in play. It's going to hit all of them. The damage to our creatures is going to be prevented, remember. And of course, we're going to gain a zillion life off of that. Works with any of our targeted burn spells. We can do this to players as well, right? We can cast a lightning bolt, hit our opponent with it, and then it's going to hit all players. And again, it's going to get prevented to us because the damage to us gets prevented if our Rem is in play. Just really fantastic additions to the deck. This is just such a fun, interesting deck. I might keep it and play it myself. Again, I'm just using a lot of these cards that, you know, maybe don't really fit necessarily in a lot of other decks. A card like Satyr Fire Dancer, for example, is one of those cards I've been wanting to use for a long, long time. And I finally am like, wow, this is the deck that I can put it in. So what I love most about Commander is finding these obscure cards that don't really see much love, like Blaze Commando, that finally there's a deck where it fits absolutely perfect in. And this is the one. Rem Karolus. Very interesting, very unique, and really fun commander. One of my favorites from the new set. And the deck list for this is in the description below. Feel free to give it a click. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.